Some say, well, the calendar was changed. Well, there have been a couple of changes to the calendar. Here's an example of one. When we went from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar in 1582, you'll notice what happened. They added 10 days to compensate for the seasons. They also put in leap years so they'd keep things on track. And you went to October 1, 2, 3, 4, 15. So did it change the calendar? Yes. Did it change the weekly cycle? Not at all. It went from Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Sabbath, Saturday. The weekly cycle has never been changed by the calendar. Someone wrote a letter to the U.S. Naval Observatory, and they said, have there been any changes in the calendar through history that have affected the weekly cycle? They wrote back and they said they don't know of any record of any change to the calendar that has ever affected the continuity of the weekly cycle. And so when people say, well, the challenge, we don't know what day Saturday and Sunday really are anymore because the calendar's been changed. I think it's always interesting that they never have a problem with the calendar until they learn the Sabbath truth. Then they say the calendar was changed. We don't know. And if you don't believe that, then you've got the evidence of 15 million, 16 million Jews around the world. And I could see that some of them might be shipwrecked on a deserted island and they lose track of the time and say, we don't remember what day is Saturday anymore. But for the whole nation to forget is very unlikely.
So nothing Doug said here impacts the first day Sabbath position. Nothing to do with the calendar change. There are probably some people out there that say that and have used that argument. But in terms of tonight's discussion, just so people know, no bearing. The Sabbath at the end of the week was a fall from grace and man's rest and work being impacted by the curse put on creation. Doug, you already admitted that the Sabbath was made for man. Days are a part of creation insofar as they are a product of the sun and the moon, which are parts of creation. The second Adam came and restored what the first Adam broke by redeeming the creation that fell, recreating it, and restores the order man had with God prior to sin entering, which was man's first day being God's seventh-day Sabbath, God's rest. He evidenced here that the SDA position does not rightly recognize that the seventh day in creation was God's seventh day, not man's. And again, like I said earlier, whenever they appeal to Jews observing the end of the week Sabbath, they further evidence their unfamiliarity with new creation because they are appealing to individuals who reject Christ and are still in the old creation themselves. The Jews are still looking for the Messiah, Doug, because they're still observing the types and shadows that the Messiah is the actual substance of, which is why it's an insult to Christ to continue in them when the substance has come. So just like the Jews, that's what the SDA sign to the world every week. But also, Doug, the Jews had other Sabbaths. They had first day, second day, third day, fourth day Sabbaths. The Roman calendar has influenced your thinking on this, sir. Here's an example. (1988-89) calendar, and notice how the Jewish year lines up with it. Let me get this out of the way as well. The first column gives some examples of first day Sabbaths that occurred in the Jewish calendar. The Feast of First Fruits, which is Resurrection Day. That was never a Sabbath day in and of itself. God created something new when he called Resurrection Day a first day Sabbath, which we are going to look at. Which is why the Old Testament anticipated a new day, just like it anticipated a new song, a new Exodus, a new redemption, a new creation, etc. Notice the numerous Sabbaths in the Hebrew calendar. The highlighted dates are dates that would have been Sabbaths even if they occurred sometime in the middle of the week. Most of these are laid out in Leviticus 23, which we will be looking at some later. These names too, like Nisan and Iyar, are month names for those that don't know. The first of every month was a new moon Sabbath, with the seventh new moon being a special Sabbath called the Feast of Trumpets. So Numbers 28, 29, Leviticus 23 again. But then you've got Nisan 15, the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread was a Sabbath, Leviticus 23, John 19. Nisan 16, the Feast of First Fruits, which again was not a Sabbath until the New Testament declared it to be so at Christ's resurrection. When the Gospels, Acts, and Corinthians refer to a first day Sabbath, and yes, like I said, we're going to look at that. They're not referring to a Jewish first day Sabbath, although those did occur in connection with other holidays. Then you got Nisan 22, the seventh day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread was a Sabbath, Numbers 28. Sivan 6, Pentecost was a Sabbath. And in this year, it falls on a Sunday. Leviticus 23, 15 through 22. Now, the calendar obviously doesn't end here. This is just an example of how the days fell. It continued with other Sabbaths that fell on other days. Tishri 1, which fell on a Monday, the Feast of Trumpets. Tishri 8, which fell on a Monday, the last day of the Feast of Trumpets. It was also a Sabbath. Tishri 10, which was on a Wednesday, the Day of Atonement. Tishri 15, which fell on a Monday. It was the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles. Tishri 21, which fell on a Sunday, was a seventh of Tabernacles, and it was a Sabbath, and so on. But get this. With regards to the New Testament, a new Sabbath was born in the Gospels. For the first time in history, the third day of Passover, which is sometimes referred to as first fruits, was referred to as a Sabbath day in each Gospel, which, like I said, we're going to be looking at later because he's going to bring these up. Matthew 28:1, Mark 16:2, Luke 24:1, and John 21. Never before had this been done before. Work was always mandated on that day, threshing the first fruit harvest. In each gospel account, we're going to see that the new had come and all things were beginning to be made new by Christ, just like Paul says in 2 Corinthians 5 and Revelation 21:5 says. There was no controversy surrounding the church's worship being on Sunday, and this is why. Doug is going to mention this later, and it's actually the exact opposite of what he says. The fact that the church was universally worshiping on the first day corporately from the beginning, and yet we see no controversy surrounding this, is evidence that there was an understanding around why it was being done that people understood. Nothing to do with conspiracies, the church going apostate, the Pope, Satan holding a diabolical council meeting in outer space to set up a false Sabbath, etc. But Doug, there were Sabbaths that fell all sorts of days, and you guys dismissing this is simply being festival Sabbaths and somehow not relevant in the discussion is evidence of why you guys miss the substance, which was their foretelling of the redemption of all things, which would be accomplished in a new day, the resurrection day, when the new creation was inaugurated by Christ, who was the antitypical fulfillment of them. But particularly, like I said, the Feast of First Fruits. And according to Hebrews 4:10, Jesus entered his rest on this day, which is why, unlike God in creation, who entered his seventh day, God in redemption enters the first after the work of redemption was accomplished. So don't say we don't have any biblical basis for this. You're going to see when we look at Leviticus, because they'll say, God never called any other day holy. Really? Then why does he call the first day Sabbath of first fruits in Leviticus holy? Why does he call it the eighth day holy? A holy convocation, not to do any ordinary work on it. So again, don't say we don't have any biblical basis for any of this. We just see a lot more fully what you guys miss by your hyper focusing in on small sound bites of redemptive history, which keeps you guys from seeing the bigger picture.